So welcome back, those of you who haven't been here for a little while. It's lovely to see your faces, and I can see there's a couple of new people as well. So this is the masterclass. So this is where we dig into the topic of the month with a little more focus on some of the nuances. Normally, the people that attend this session have got a little bit of experience with ID, either as a practitioner out there coaching and consulting with it, or as one of our clients who are using it as part of their, collaboration language within their organization. So this is building off the Ask Me Anything, like a free-for-all conversation around just questions that are on people's minds. But before we dig into those questions, and I put some of them in the invite, but you might have others that are on your mind, or what we talk about today might provoke it. Feel free to put your question in the chat if it's occurring to you. You don't want to risk forgetting it or whatever. Just put it in the chat, and we have people like Ian and Greg will comment or probably most people can comment in the chat with their reactions to your questions. And then we can also deal with it live here in the class. If we have time, I'll do an ID debrief for whoever might like that as well. We did that with our webinar last time into Europe. It was just brilliant. One of the guys that he said, I've never had my ID debrief to me, actually, because he'd done it all online and so on. So I went through it with him, and it was amazing. But it was amazing for all of us, partly because of his reaction, but also we froze it, along the way, froze and say, okay, here's why I'm saying what I'm saying. And he would say, and here's why I'm reacting. It was really cool for everyone to learn from that experience. So if we have time, we'll get into that today as well. Given that it is the masterclass, let's do a check-in on how we're doing with being in stride. And so this is given, let me just call this up so that I can show you. For those of you who haven't seen this, we refer to our peak performance indicator here. So this is the slide that some of you might remember or are quite used to, just talking about life when we're in stride, true to ourselves, true to our ID, is when we are at our authentic best, true to at our best, true to our authentic self. And so it's just valuable to stop. I would suggest you do it daily. Some people, think of it often, not necessarily daily, but just to check yourself and go, how am I doing? Am I in stride? What's missing for me to be in stride or more in stride? If I am in stride, why is that working for me right now? So that you can figure out the pattern that works for you and what's missing, and then get yourself back in stride. On our new platform, it actually guides you on how to do that. And if you haven't been in there to check that out yet, if you need access, let Ian know, Ian Robertson, who's on the call. Otherwise, go in and have a look, and have a look at the ID Pulse, because you can actually track it. But you can put in your score, then based on your score, it'll tell you, are there things that are stressing you? Are there things that are energizing you? It'll give you hints on what they might be, and then gives you strategies against each of those energizers or stressors. And then you can come back in later and watch the pattern flowing with your score. So it's a very cool feature of the new platform. So in the chat, some of you might have already done that, but you might just want to put your score. If you think of it on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being that you're on that green arrow, totally in stride, not only feeling at your best, but one of the things you'll notice when you are in stride is you have more confidence and more courage to speak your truth. And in today's sort of world, a lot of people talk about, I feel seen, or I feel invisible. And a lot of that is linked to whether people are in stride or out of stride. As a leader, one of the best things you can do for all the leadership study and so on you can do out there, it's really get your own house in order. Show up in stride, be true to yourself, and the vibration that you radiate out to other people when you are in stride becomes something that's not only magnetic, it makes people want to be around you because it's inspiring, but it's also inspirational because it helps other people sort of go, you know what, I want more of that. I want a life that I can be, living with that type of energy. So it's a great place to start each and every day. All right, so let's just look at what the scores are that people are putting in the chat here. And, keep in mind, this could also change later today. It might have been different earlier today, could change tomorrow. But just to sort of reflect on where you're at today, you can see there's some high scores here, like Greg's a 9, Susie's an 8, got a whole bunch of 8s, 8.5 for Alona. But we've also got people who are like at a 6. Ben, what does a P mean? We could all have a guess. We've got a few sixes. Would anyone like to talk about their six? What six and middling? What's that mean, Cheryl? You're on me.
So there, yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So truthfully, my mother-in-law passed away yesterday, so that's part of the reason why I'm at a 6. It was a long struggle. It's not like we didn't have time to get ready, but that's a lot of why I'm middling. But I'm also new in my role. I'm new at this company and I'm still learning. So my comfort level is not as high as it probably will be 6 months from now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's true. So firstly, condolences to you and your husband for your mother-in-law and all of your family. That's always a sad, no matter what notice you get, it's still a really sad, contemplative time. So nice that you're here amongst a community of like-minded people that care about these sorts of things and how to help people, through the turbulence of life and to look for the positives and the gifts that it gives you nonetheless. I remember when my parents died, as sad as it was, because they died fairly close to each other, I look back, I mean, I think I've cried twice, but mostly I smile because of the memories and the gifts and the way we all rallied at the time. So you might actually be in for a really beautiful family time as well, over the coming weeks where everyone bonds together. It's really can be a lovely time. So I wish that for you. When you talk about being new, you're welcome. When you talk about being new in the role, one of the things to keep in mind with ID, because a lot of people will say, oh, well, I'm out of stride because, I'm out of stride because we've got a lot of change going on at work. I'm out of stride because I'm new to the role. I'm out of stride for whatever the reason is. But actually, even when you're new in a role, you can do new in role in stride. You can do monotony in stride. You can do lots of change going on and turbulence in stride. And so the challenge when you look at your ID, Cheryl, is you're like, okay, so it's not as comfortable as it will be when I'm more the expert, because being an 8 in Verify, you thrive on being the expert, right? So clearly, as you get to know the network and so on, you and just all the machinations of the new company, how decisions get made, what to be careful of and all that, of course you're going to do better. But if there are perspective, and perspective is one of the gifts and strengths of a verifier. You can still sort of go, well, what am I an expert at? I'm an expert at leadership. I'm an expert at problem solving, and if I've got to build my network, okay, then let's get intentional about that. Like who is my network that I need to build? And the minute you feel, what the key is, feeling on top and in control. And the minute you feel you've got it sorted, not because you have gotten around the network, but because now I know who it is, I know who I've got to go and meet, I've got that starting to happen, just that feeling of getting up on top like that makes you feel, maybe you won't be a 10, but you might go from being a 6 to an 8, and you exude better energy. So I love that about ID, that no matter what the circumstances, you can still find a way to be fairly well in stride nonetheless, Does that help?
Yes, it absolutely does. And I'm just finding my way is probably the best way to put it. There have been some very good things that have occurred and that we've accomplished for sure. And it's nice having a great team in the boat with me as I work my way towards what I might call expertise at where I'm at now at Juniper.
Good for you.
Right. Can I just ask a question? Cheryl, I thought gave us a great opening there. You said that all this is happening, the new stuff at work, but it'll be okay in a few months. Or you said something like in a few months that it'll be better.
I will feel more comfortable. So I like to call this, I'm comfortable with being uncomfortable right now. There is discomfort, but I'm cool with being uncomfortable. But I always find everything clicks in, as I kind of cross that 1 year mark. So I'm comfortable with being uncomfortable, but I'm calling out that, still uncomfortable. Don't know enough people, learning processes. And
Gotcha.
And my last employer, let's just say it was a short stint, and it will take me a long time before I really feel comfortable again, because the last ride was not what I expected at all.
Okay. So here's the tip I think I heard that when you said that, which is that it's going to be okay and I'll get comfortable and so forth. So I was going to suggest that why would that happen? What would be occurring that would happen? And rather just say, well, it'll just be time. I'm wondering, is there something that you do that you sort of unconsciously do that you could do more of or do less of something else, and you could start being that comfortable sooner? That's what I heard when you said sooner. I went, oh, well, why wait?
Yeah, the short answer is I've always found that when I start a new job, just all of a sudden it feels like the light bulb goes on, like it goes from dim to fully on. And I tend to cross the chasm somewhere around 1 year when I feel like, okay, I get it now. And it's a feeling. It's nothing more than that. There's nothing. I think I'm in the right things right now, and we're gonna go to SKO in January, and I'll meet a lot of people that I haven't met yet.
Right.
And I'll feel better.
Beautiful. Well, congratulations on the new role too. That's a good move. If things aren't working, good that you change it rather than, let it all sort of accumulate. All right. Would anyone else like to talk about their score, particularly if anyone was at like a 6 and there's something on that you value the input from the group, or even just the sharing of what's going on sometimes helps in a cathartic way? Would anyone like to share anything?
I will. I'm a 6, and one of the things that kind of sparked my interest that I never connected, I am a void verify. And in one of the posts, it was the talk about negative energy and being kind of affected by that. And one of the things, there's a lot of change going on in my world right now and a lot of negative energy around me. And I'm finding that I can't, when I'm thinking about good day, bad day, like where am I in my flow? I'm at a 6, but I don't really know why. Like it's just a feeling. So I'm curious to learn more. I've never delved into that aspect of verify before.
Thank you, Phyllis. Would anyone who's an avoid verify like to, which we've only got you, Elena, I think. Okay, Elena. Would you like to maybe help Phyllis what it means, what your experience of what an avoid verify looks like, feels like, and how you maybe handle negative energy?
So what I find, and this is just for me, but I'm also a 4 in verify. And what I find is that when I look at the verify drive, I see that people who are driven to use verify can separate out and compartmentalize a little more readily than I can. It's like, that's the work thing, and that's the home thing, and that's the whatever. And for me as an avoid verify, it's all one. And so when it goes dark, it's all dark. When it's good, it's all good, right? Does that resonate for you, Phyllis?
Yes.
And I think it's
absolutely. Yes. Like what you just said, I was like, wow, that really is, because I'm not compartmentalizing. Like it's
right.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure it's a skill that I can develop, but I can acknowledge and say, just because this part of my life is challenging doesn't mean everything is. And I can and you look to your other drives where you're very practical from your use authenticate, and you see possibility from your use improvise, and you're like, okay, what part is great? What am I looking forward to? That kind of thing. That's just what I would say. That happens to me sometimes.
Thank you for that. That was really like a good thing, because one of the things that I think continues to get me out of stride is not stopping and saying, why aren't you compartmentalizing? So that is really good, because there are times when I kind of stop and do that. And I'm like, wow, I do compartmentalize, but I have to consciously think about it. And it's typically my husband going, will you please go back into your office and come out like a person I can spend time with? So thank you. That's wonderful. I'd love to hear anything else.
And so to me, what that just it embodies is the need for a non-negotiable, right? From the avoid complete. So those of us who are avoid complete, again, very flexible about everything. Every situation is really different, right? I respond differently to all those things. But I know that when I'm like, I have to go to bed, that happens to be my thing. Or I start feeling hopeless, I go, oh, where's my non-negotiable? And my non-negotiable is, all right, where's my gratitude practice? What's my whatever? And so it's almost like a trigger, like a snap. Anytime that happens, I don't waver. That's the thing.
Perfect.
So I hear you, Elena, but in terms of nuances, does compartmentalizing actually help? I get that's what you don't do, but then does that help when you do that more consciously?
Well, I think I don't ever compartmentalize because I can't. I mean, it's just, I know we can all do all things, but it's not about that. It's about knowing that I'm in that thing of I'm looking at everything through one lens and stepping back and going, okay, what is working? And that kind of, I don't think that I compartmentalize to that degree. So let me just give you a story about this. I was married to someone who was more driven to verify than I was, not, 100%, but, and he was my boss for a while. We got married and we were peers, and then he got promoted. And at some point he said, Ilona, you need to separate the feedback from home away from the feedback at work. And I was like, that's not going to happen. I find a new job. And I did. I found a new job because I couldn't separate those things in that way. But in that moment, I could go, that's the work, Dave. That's just the work, Dave. It didn't, like, I don't think I really compartmentalized, but I at least had a different perspective, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Okay. And then the other part of your question was around negative. Sorry, Greg, you're going to say something? No. So the other part of your question was around negative energy. And this is really interesting because one of the learnings that I got, I think this is right, I'm really checking with you guys, from these webinars was that when you're an avoid verifier, it's beautiful that you have this empathetic streak that, you just really can feel and get other people. The challenge or the vulnerability with it is that you absorb the energy of almost the environment around you, even if it's not associated with you type thing directly, but you can just feel it. So it could be things on the news, and you just feel that and it brings you down. And firstly, my question would be, I'm sort of asking this to expand what Phyllis was asking, but is that true? And then if it is, how do you manage that so that you can almost insulate yourself from a lot of the environmental energies that aren't directly connected to you, but if you're not aware of it, they affect you?
Mhm.
Are you asking me?
Well, yeah, you or even Phyllis. We don't really have other avoid verifiers on the call.
I know that I'm more successful because I do pick up on that. And I never, like, I've always known that I pick up on that energy. Like, I can walk into a room and have to leave. Like, I definitely have that, but I've never connected it to my ID. And what's interesting is kind of connecting it to that now. And it's funny because, Ilona, you said that you don't
Compartmentalized.
I can't say that word. I can't do it. And I don't. So I don't necessarily do that. In my mind, I flip a switch. And since I've worked from home, and I've worked from home since 2008, I have to have a ritual to take myself from the work day and say, work is now done and all of that negative energy. And I actually have to physically like shut my door with a big sound, not to slam it, but I have to like, and all of that needs to stay in there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting that you say about the news and things. And I need a few minutes of quiet time and things like that. So there's definitely that needing to transition really difficult. And for me too, like, is this I call it bucket of water to carry, and kind of physically pour it out if it's not like I have to do some mental imagery to really help me get past that. And so I'm really liking this connection because I feel like at that point, then it's part of me looking at, am I in flow and am I in stride versus not, and kind of going to that next level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's a really big deal because, even when people are just flat, the energy they project can really affect other avoid verifiers. Obviously there's not a bigger concern when the energy is really positive that inflates the balloon, but I don't think a lot of people who are avoid verify, I think this is great learning for verifiers as well, is that the effect that even if they're not communicating they're vibrating, and the vibration can really pull down the other avoid verifiers around them. So it's that's where that comes from, Phyllis. And I think just the awareness of that, and as Lorna said, the acknowledgement of it is a real key for avoid verifiers.
And to take it one step further, I think the avoid, verify, use, improvise combination makes it more intense, because we're so impacted by anything that feels like negative or hopeless or like, sorry, I think I interrupted someone.
Well, why is compartmentalizing related to use, verify, avoid, verify?
So for me, I have a son who's an 8 in verify. And what I watch him do is go, that's sports, that's school, that's work, that's the girlfriend, that's the thing. And it's about what's right in different situations. It also has to do with the natural talent and ability to prioritize. It's like, oh, in this moment, like school is more important than work, which is more important than the girlfriend, which is more important than the lacrosse team or whatever.
Hopefully he doesn't say that out loud to her.
She's a good sport. A lot of times she's at the top, but not always. Maybe I don't have a good answer for that. Maybe someone else can answer that.
It's Cheryl, it's all about perspective, what comes naturally for a verifier. And it's so natural that it doesn't feel like it's unique to the verifiers. As a verifier, you can feel like, well, everyone would do this. It's like talking, but being able to sort of rationalize and sort of go, well, that's really this big and that important and that critical, and this one's smaller or different. And that sense of being able to see the differences and just the evaluation of them, that it happens so naturally that it brings a perspective compartmentalizing element to the way you see the world. To an avoid verify, it's all or nothing. Like we can even say, well, I'll give it, I'll pace myself, I'll regulate my effort, I'm mostly in, all of that as a verifier. An avoid verifier is either in or out. There's not regulated levels of effort and energy and commitment and so on, all or nothing. And so the same thing happens emotionally.
Which is why it's really helpful for us to have support around prioritization, because everything's important. It feels, I know this sounds really silly, but to someone who's driven to verify, probably, it feels judgmental to say this task or that person or this thing is more important than that thing. And it takes so much effort to be like, I know that person really, and it's about this, and it's antithetical to how I think.
Yeah, I think the simple visual is avoid verifiers are more on a horizontal plane, whereas verifiers are more on a vertical plane. We tend to sort of see things in a prioritization of 1 through 10, a vertical order. But to an avoid verify, everything's on an equal playing field. So titles really frustrate, avoid verifiers, because it automatically makes people look like they're more important. And like as Elena said, there's a judgment about that. Even I remember, even back, still happens now, but when people have an office, it's like, I got promoted, so now I get an office. There's a judgment about that, because you're not just equal amongst everyone. And that, a team of equals is really appealing to the avoid verify. And it's why a lot of the better leaders that you see in terms of bringing teams together and collaboration, the people who do that really naturally and really well, a lot of them are avoid verifiers, because there's no sense of someone's more important than others, and they're very inclusive. And verifiers have to work at that. So I'm not saying verifiers can't lead teams, but it has to be something you've got to be very conscious of, how judgmental some of those things are, whether it's titles or where people are seated. I hate going to meetings where you see like the leadership team all sits around the table, and then the people that are like the admin support or the extended team are sitting sort of one row out or around the wall of the room, and it's just it's a mental thing that they're not as equal as the others. And that wouldn't even be noticed amongst a team of verifiers, but it's definitely felt by the avoid verifiers. All right. Does anyone else want to comment on their score? Ask a question or make a comment about their score on the peak performance. Okay, well, let's move into questions. So there are some questions. Greg, when we open up today, there was a question you had on your mind. I put some questions, I'll just flash them up on the screen just to provoke. We don't have to dig into these questions specifically. These were just to promote, thought. There's some things that we can talk about that have come up more recently for me in a lot of my coaching conversations. But does anyone have something on their mind? Maybe Greg, given that you were talking about it first, maybe you'd like to kick off with the question you were sharing with Ian as we started the call. And then if anyone else has any questions, either put them in the chat or bring them up once we finish listening to Greg's.
I'll do it after. Let's let some of the new kids have a go.
Okay, great. Thanks, Greg. Does anyone have a question on their mind? We've talked about the avoid, verify for Phyllis and impacts of negative energy. No? All right, well, I'm going to kick off with what we've got on the screen. So this sense of being trapped, when we talk about the needs of different IDs, like we just talked about the
hang on. I was going to let them have another go, not you. So here's the thing. It came from a lot of people who said, I love this idea, or I love this strategy, or I'm a Myers-Briggs, or whatever it is, and they don't use it in the moment. And then they make a mess of something, and they don't listen to the feedback, and then they have to go back later and go, oh my, I've got to clean this up. So I was wondering, do different drives have a different strategy or a set of what it's going to take for me to go back and clean that up? Because it always seems like, but you have to, because it gets worse. And if you don't, you got to see this person again. And in that. So I was really thinking, what do we need? What do we do when we've blown it? And we have to go back and clean it up. And it's part us and it's part them. But do different drives have a different way of doing it? Like for me, it's just like wearing the wet swimmers after the beach. There's sand everywhere. I've got to do something about it, right? And other people can leave it and maybe ignore it. So that was the question. Is it related to our drives, how we go back and clean up? And I'm believing we all have to from time to time.
So can I play back your question? So your question is, when something's happened and we've got to clean it up, is the way we go about cleaning it up different for different people, including, do some people not even feel the need to clean something up,
Exactly. Yeah. Like a narcissist would go, why are you crying?
Right. So, and what I'm hearing you say, Greg, is first of all, you have to clean it up. Like if you find something out, you just can't stop until you've cleaned it up. How do you go about, maybe to kick off the thought process for others, how do you go about cleaning it up?
Okay, so I have a sense of, the need to help and the need to not get trapped. When I do something, I go, oh God, what did I say that for, or something? We were in a meeting and we were helping this coaching. Vera's sitting next to me, and she's there watching me, and I'm sort of respond to this guy, and she gives me a tap on my knee, my leg, and it's the signal like, let him finish. You're coming in too hot, right? And I moved my chair away so she couldn't tap me, right? Just subtly. And she was right, and the guy, and we had to clean up, and I had to go see Andrew, and then I had to deal with her. She goes, why do you have me here? So it was so, I thought I can't be the true me and leave that kind of stuff hanging out there. I can't face them. So it was a real not true me, not just not helping, the opposite of helping, right? Making things worse. So I was just wondering, is that just me, my makeup, or my feeling of dismissal, blah, blah? Or do other people say, oh man, this is what I have to get over to go do it? Because once you do it, it's good.
Well, can I just explain for those who are new on the call, when you're hearing Greg say that, you can see his ID score, 5826. And so a lot of what we do is we look at the strongest drives. So in Greg's case, there's that 8 in authenticate and the 2 incomplete. And so when you hear him talking about, I just couldn't face them, that facing them is more of an authenticate thing. The need to go and help comes from the authenticate drive. Greg, you made the comment about trapped, that you're feeling trapped. How does trapped connect to what the story you're just sharing?
Well, trapp's the 2. The trapped is I have this thing will be there forever. I can't move forward. It's a real sense of stuck in the mudness about it, because I've hurt somebody or I've annoyed them or something. I didn't, So yeah, those are the 2. The 2 really kicks in like, you can't go forward with this. even in your own life, because you're a phony, that kind of thing. And the authentic kid goes, yeah, you too, you're trapped because you're a phony, right? So those two go after me, right? And I have to do something.
Okay, thank you. So what about for other people? Do you feel when something's happened, do you feel a need to clean it up, or is it more you to move on and let time we just move on, leave that alone, and we can move on, okay? And is there a time issue about it? Like, do you need to do it, like it sounds like, Greg, you got to do it straight away, which would make sense with your ID, or as soon as you possibly can? Other people might have a need to let it have time in between, and then there's a process. So who would like to comment?
Go ahead, Amanda.
Okay, sorry, just quickly, I was gonna say, for me, usually I have to go and think it through by myself. So I walk away, I'll reflect, I'll judge myself, I'll go, what did I do wrong? Is it fair? What did the other person do? But I will always go back and apologize, whether I think I was right or wrong. I just feel the need of apologizing for the situation and not keeping it, just in a not a good mood, or like I feel responsible for apologizing and moving on. But yeah, I do need time on my own to reflect on the situation. So really rarely, especially if it's a heated argument, I can't think it through and fix it on the moment.
That would be very true for you, being 8571. So that one in improvise, that when there's the pressure, I always remember, a couple of pictures in my head are a job interview when someone like Amanda's ID is being asked questions, and the person like, and you know the answer, but it just won't come to you. And the minute you walk out the door and that pressure is off, your mind gets flooded with, and it's like, why didn't I think of that 5 minutes ago? And it's almost like, because you can't under the pressure, it's like the cogs stop turning. So it makes perfect sense that for you to get to a place where you can handle it, Amanda, you need to have time away from the heat, where in the solitude of your own space and mind, you can just like let everything settle, think it through, and then you're in a better place to go and have a conversation. Because when you think about a conversation for someone with your ID, that might get a little emotional or contentious, immediately pulls you out of stride, because it means there's a lot of thinking off the cuff, whereas if it goes to plan, or there's no real pressure, that's a beautiful conversation. But it's when it becomes a little more animated or emotional, makes sense? Then how do you go about it? So you've had the heat, you go away, you process it. So I'm sort of, that implies you're going to come back and want to address it with an apology or something like that. How do you then go about the healing, the repairing piece that Greg was referring to?
I'll just, call that person and say I need a few moments and talk it through and say my perspective. And it's funny, especially if the person is an avoid verify, or like someone like Joe, my husband, 2738, like I'll come, I'm like, remember what happened yesterday? And he's like, what? And then I want to talk it through, and he's like, oh, you're still thinking about that? That's all good. I'm like, oh, so you're not upset? He's like, no, I told you everything I was thinking right there and then. Like, what? There's nothing to talk about. So, but he'll still respect that I need to go through that, which is good when you know each other's ideas. But
that's one of the things I've found myself is, you get really upset at something, and then a little later I'm like, I know that I'm upset and I can't remember what it was I was upset about, So yeah, great example. All right, Cameron, you were going to share something too.
Yeah, as Greg was talking, I was like, words were coming to, words were really clear to me. Like when there's discourse, or I may have impacted someone, or a situation, I think of three things live big in me. One is, oh no, like alignment and risk. I'm like, oh no, I'm not in alignment with a person or a project. And then I think, oh, that, and for me, that's a big risk. Like, so I immediately, of course, then jump to my use complete drive. And I'm like, okay, I have to get a plan to get back in stride and get back in alignment with like how, and part of what, if I'm lucky enough to know someone's ID, is to then think about where that rub happened, not only for myself, like where it went sideways, but also what I can presume their needs were, right, that weren't met. And so I go to planning, right? And the other thing, and I don't know if this is ID related or an onion skin, but I'm hard pressed to, like, I will actually work really hard to get myself around a situation, get my brain around a situation so that I can legitimately apologize. And if I can't legitimately apologize, I don't like, because the authenticity of the apology is more important to me than just a placating. Like it has to be real, if that makes sense. I guess everybody's, I don't know, maybe not everybody, maybe people apologize when they think they're just supposed to, but I have to really have it being aligned with my whole being before I can do that. And I work like, right, it's my use complete. I work really hard to think about all the implications of not being in right relationship.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Any other perspectives on when something happens, how the need to clean it up and how you go about cleaning it up?
Can I add one more thing about avoid verifiers and why you all are amazing partners? They really don't sweat a lot of, like, my experience is really are less judgmental. So when you really do go sideways, in my experience, so when things go sideways, they really aren't as, they come around a little more quickly than someone wired like myself.
Yeah, I mean, even when they pick you up on something, it's done with a lot less sting than I know someone like myself would do it. And even when I'm thinking that I'm not stinging, it's still a sting. So it's just something about the way verifiers can do things, just the calling it out. I'll never forget this lady. She's often on our calls. Catherine Palin Brickworth made a presentation. This is probably 20 years ago, and she's a 9. She's like 3 in verify and a 9 in improvise. And she came up and she said to me, "So what do you think of my presentation?" And I went, and in my head, right, this is what's happening like in a nanosecond. Well, it's Catherine. She's a professional at this. She's National Speakers Association. She'll want some really good feedback. So I'm thinking, what can I tell her that's really insightful? That's what's going on in like a nanosecond. And she went, "Oh, don't worry. You've already it's clear about your feedback, because I hadn't said anything. And that was just so negative to her. Just the fact that I was thinking, instead of just reacting straight away. And I've never forgotten that lesson, yeah. So even when we don't think we're being critical, just thinking can be critical, or, to an avoid verify person. It's so powerful to learn about how we being us shows up and impacts other people. We haven't even, like in that case, haven't opened our mouth. It's just what's going on upstairs and how that lands for someone else.
Yeah, but it's the next conversation you two have right then where the gold is, where she gets to see there was way more there and she dismissed it in a nanosecond. And there's some feedback about her presentations. When is she so quick to judgment she doesn't hear the audience? That was a real teachable moment there, Yeah.
You're assuming there was something good about to come, Greg.
Just pointing out how quick she dismissed you, that's all.
No, but you're right. I mean, you're very good at that. About it's the what happens next piece. I think that's a great point too.
I think, I'm just sort of jumping in. I've been processing, of course. For me, it's always, you have to go away, and it's a version of, I think, what Amanda was saying, and probably a bit of Karen as well, was because I think as the agent verifier, your first is like, well, I'm right, they're wrong. That's, and, why didn't they get it? And having learned over the years that, well, okay, I'm not always right. So I'll actually spend some time processing it and what's the lesson here for me? Because I think I need to learn something first before I actually go back to have another conversation. Because otherwise the danger is if you go back to apologize, and I think my 3-6 also feels you should clean it up, the right thing, get the harmony back and all the rest of it. But if you don't get back in the right frame of mind, it doesn't actually, you're not really apologizing. You're sort of almost, just making some excuses for them, where it's really trying to understand, what's the lesson I'm taking away and sharing that. And in some cases, it might be, look, I still don't think I'm wrong, but I'm actually I'm ready to hear what you've got to say. And I probably wasn't there in the first place. I've been really honest and straightforward with it. It's sort of the go-to.
You said something that I'd never thought of before, Ian, and that is, to me, a conditional or hedged apology. Again, because I'm avoid verify, it's like it's all or nothing, and unless it's full-throated, it's not an apology.
Yeah, no, I think that's obviously with opposite IDs, Alona. That's a big thing for I'm like, I know I should, to get, again, harmonies appeased, but also it's the right thing to do and all the rest of it. But if you're apologizing and it's not really sincere, then just don't do it. But still, but I still think there's a value in a conversation, and that's why I think
absolutely
recognize it's not always about going back and saying I was right, you were right, I was wrong. Sometimes we're saying actually there's some more. We need to talk a little bit more about that because I think there's more to it, and let's have that conversation.
So for myself, when I think about this question and what I'm watching here in the group, I think, a person with decent EQ probably does feel the need to clean something up. How we go about it, obviously, is going to be based more on our ID. For me, as someone who's done a lot of apologizing in my life, and I mean that I'm not being facetious. I mean, it's just, I often see things where I'm like, oh, I should have done that differently. It helps me enormously to make sure my heart's in the right place before I go. Like, that concept of head and heart. If I'm thinking too much about it, if I'm preparing my answers, it's a disconnect from my heart. And so the place that I find works best for me is to, and I don't know if this is just like from my ID or whether it's because of certain drives, I haven't stopped and analyzed it. But it's all about getting my heart in the right place. Like, do I really care about this person? Does this relationship really matter to me? And the way I'm coming across, there's always something about, am I showing up in a way that is who I want to be? Am I proud of me in that moment? And, that's where I go to get my heart in the right place. And I've found if I do that, then however the conversation goes will be good, and that doesn't mean it will all be healed straight away, because it may not be meant to heal straight away. It might need to have more learning in it somehow. But no matter what I tried before in terms of techniques or thinking it through and preparing, whatever it was coming more from the head, which I think is a verified vulnerability, it wasn't as healing for the relationship as when I made sure my heart was in the right place first. And that could be about the other person. It's probably mostly about me. Who do I want to be in this moment? Am I showing up in a way that is true to my values and everything I stand for? And that gets me back on track, like, immediately. All right. Has this provoked another question? Has anyone got another question that's on their mind about their ID or about ID in general? Is there anyone that wants to, when I offered before about doing a debrief on an ID, I'm happy to switch to that if there's anyone that would particularly like to have me debrief them on their ID. Otherwise, we can dig into one of the questions that I had up on the screen.
I've been out of the loop for a while. I would not mind a debrief.
Okay. Glad someone's game.
I'm game.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Let's go. Okay. Is that okay with everyone else? Anyone else got anything else they want to contribute? Because this might sort of close us out for the call, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to debrief Cheryl on her ID, but I'm going to stop and freeze frame it at different times to explain why I'm going to say or did say certain things. And Cheryl, please do the same so that we learn from what's happening for you as well. All right. So the first thing I do when I am going to do a debrief, always is get myself present to the person, and that means what I'm thinking about and feeling about, and the examples and so on that I might use right now could be different to if I was doing this with Cheryl even again tomorrow. I could have different things pop up because we're all in different places. So I just sort of zero in and make sure that I'm like focused on Cheryl and have her in my mind in this moment, So being present is one of the first things I do. Then the second thing is look at her strongest drives. And, in Cheryl's case, what's interesting is she's really got 3 strong drives, the 8 and then the 2 3s. And I step back from that and I just go, what comes up? Because the way I think is this person is going to take 1 or maybe 2 things away from their ID, from our conversation. If it was up to me what those 1 or 2 things might be, what might they be? And I wait for something to come into my being. The 1 or 2 things might be nothing to do with me. They might be what Cheryl takes. So I'm open to that too. But that's what I try and get present to, rather than sort of spraying a whole lot of stuff about Cheryl's ID. I'll just start with 1 or 2 things in my mind and see how that lands and where the conversation goes from there. So with that, let's get into it. So Cheryl, when we talk about your ID and you think about, I'm going to combine all your drives here because that's just what came up for me and you've got, some experience with it. But the A633, the thing that's come up straight away is high standards. And the high standards come from being this, verify that's got to get everything right. The 6 in authenticate has a high bar because it's a personal representation of you. And so the more of you that's been on this planet, the more experience, the more skills, that you've learned, the bar goes higher because who you are has got more in the pot, And so there's a very high bar that you live your life by. And with that comes the avoid improvised drive of, I don't want to run the risk of, being judged by other people, of embarrassing myself and so on. So the bar's even higher. So you have this really high bar. And that's great in terms of standards of excellence. It bites you when it comes to happiness, because no matter what you do, there's always something that was missed, or there's always something better you could do. And it not only makes it hard on yourself, but it can make it hard on others around you, because there can be this like perpetual disappointment in you, or that they feel from you because of the bar thing, So how does that land for you, that concept of the standards, the high bar, and then just how that connects to your happiness factor?
So my children agree with you. My bar is high. But no, that lands, that's exactly it. I do. I have high standards. I have high expectations for people. And I'm not gonna lie, I like to play with A players, and that has always been true. And I hold myself to high standards. So yes, it all lands very well.
Yeah.
And yes, I'm old. I've been on this earth for a lot of years. So when I was younger, I was in huge learning mode because I wanted to do things right, always.
Okay.
And now I'm still learning, but the learning mode is not as bright in a lot of ways as I know what good looks like, and I really want to make sure we all come across looking what I know good looks like.
So
yeah, totally resonates.
Thank you. So I'm going to freeze for a second. So for that, that's helpful. So what's going on for me right now is I'm thinking, okay, that's good validation that what I've said has landed well and Cheryl accepts that. But I don't feel for myself that I've given Cheryl anything yet that's really that insightful. I feel like I've shared something with Cheryl that she already knows. And for myself, the high standard I hold myself to is I want to change her life. You know, I want to say something, share something, have something come from our experience where 10 years from now, she's like, wow, that was one of those teachable moments that helped impact my life. So that's what goes on for me. When I'm doing a debrief with someone, I'm watching the reaction and look at, okay, that's all very well that there was validation, but where do I go to next so that there's something that really shifts? And rather than throwing something new, I would prefer to have it connected to what we've just been talking about, so that it just doesn't become confusing. And so as I listened to you sort of validating that before, Cheryl, what came up for me was the high standards are great. I mean, as someone who's got not as the same ID, but the concept of the high bar, I get it, and that all works. But when I think about bullseye and dartboard, you know, like your high standards are higher than what most people sort of would often run with. And that sense of, if you want to keep life moving along, if it's on the dartboard, that's often good enough. Keep moving forward rather than worry about the bullseye. But I think the really important thing is to understand what happens for other people, because just knowing you and knowing you are a people person, the relationships are really important. And so often the high standards are all about the work and the thing, the task, you know, of how things get done to high standard. But if you look at what's happening to the relationships around you, what happens to an 8633 when you get really focused on the high standards is that unless you're actually focused on the relationship being the high standard, the relationship can get compromised. And they almost are an either or, you know, because unless you're thinking relationship, it's so easy. Your ID defaults more to the task side, the doing of the thing. And what people miss out on is the other half of Cheryl. Because when you are focused on the relationship, there's actually a really fun side of your personality that bubbles through. But when you're focused, you know, to get the standard, you normally get serious about that. And the seriousness compromises the personality, the fun side of you, the relatable side of you. You don't need any help to become more high standard. It's so woven into your DNA that you could let go of trying to be a high standard person. You'll still be a high standard person. My encouragement to you would be, now that you've got all that in a great place, focus on letting people experience the human side of Cheryl, the relatable side of Cheryl, the fun side of Cheryl. Make that where the high bar piece goes, and you'll have people around you experience you in a completely different way, including husband, including children. And they'll be like, wow, mum's more fun, mum's more relatable, mum's more compassionate. You know, like there's more of that will come through when you're making that the priority as opposed to the high standards. And yet it's still high standards because it's holding yourself to the high standard of relationships.
I might need some time to absorb that.
Okay.
That's really great feedback though. The focus on relationships versus the high standards of output deliverables, that it makes sense. I just need some time to absorb and think it through, in the famous words of Leonie, who I matched with. I looked at her comment and I'm like, I always need to think about things before I react.
Yeah, well, good for you. And I just think it's quite natural that in the first half of our adult lives, so many of us with our IDs will focus on getting good at things, like as you said, getting it right. But it tends to default to the task side of life, not the relationship. And there's plenty of people around us who love us for who we are anyway, but they don't get they're loving us because of the excellence, because of the expertise, because of the teaching that you've given and the guidance and all of that. But there's another whole half of you that people haven't necessarily experienced as consistently as you could share if that became more of the focus. And it's really, the word is joy. It's where a lot of your joy would actually come from. And it's where a lot of the joy that other people experience around you, they would start to experience you in a very different way. And I think you would feel much more whole if other people recognize that of you. Imagine if people didn't actually know you for having high standards. You'd be like, but you don't know me then, But what about the other half of you? That's the part I'd say, let that part shine now, because you've earned that now. You've got the rest of it under control enough that you could, even if you don't focus on that and you focus on the human side of you and let that rip, that's going to be joyful to you and wonderful for everyone around you. And especially as you start in a new team, because you, like a new company, you can be anyone you want to be now. This could be the new you that other companies prior have not experienced in the same way. And I think it would see you really shining.
Cool. Scott,
all right.
Did you want to say something?
Yeah, go for it.
What's that?
I saw you. There was the
no, thanks Cheryl. I because we have similar ideas, and I was just thinking it was very interesting, Paul, what you just said, and I was just thinking with my kids, and I find myself, I kind of vacillate to the serious on the tasks, but then I'll joke around and I guess focus. What I feel is I'm focused more on the relationship, but it's hard for me when I get very focused like on schoolwork and tasks or things I want them to do. I get that high verify element going. So I guess I find myself vacillating a little bit. And I guess my question is, how do I be that, I guess, more present on a relationship when I am focused on task, for example, with my kids? Does that make sense, Paul?
Yeah. I think it's a conscious thing. It's not going to come automatic. Like focusing on the task comes automatically because that just is your wiring. But you can focus on anything if you make it the priority. And if you make the relationship, like, do your kids enjoy you being their tutor? And you want, like, you're a good tutor. There's no question you'll get that part right because that's the task part. But how would you make it more enjoyable? And what came up for me was dartboard versus bullseye for you. If you sort of go, you know what, rather than trying to get every little thing right, if I just give them a couple of things this time and they make you feel the mistakes, I mean, we'll improve over time. It doesn't all have to be perfect each and every time. And just relax a little bit about it. They'll enjoy it more, and at least they'll keep coming back then for more.
Got it. That's great. Thanks, Paul.
I often say to my kids when we're teaching Jacob to drive and so on, the real key is not can you drive, it's and passengers in the car. It's like, will they want to come back? If we take people out, I say when we take people out on our boat, we're mucking around skiing and everything, and have a great time, but will they want to come back? And if you make it too risky, and so on, people go think we had a great time, but I'm not sure I'd want to get back on that boat again. I think that's really important to leave it so that people want to come back. And that's what I think about if I'm thinking about it. That's what I'm thinking about to be more relatable. All right, guys, I know we're out of time. If anyone has any question about what we just talked about, I'm happy to share it, but happy to stay on and cover it. Or we can let you go. All good? Okay. Well, thank you for being on the call today. Thank you, Cheryl, for letting us sort of play together there. And we'll look forward to seeing you all again next time. Have a great rest of the day, everyone.